Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. It's your host Shabbir, and welcome back to the Ilm Feed podcast. To give you some context for today's episode, I have two very close friends of mine and two people, mashallah, that have done a lot at a very young age. Two people who they have either they're in medical school or they've just graduated, mashallah, and so we can officially call one of them a doctor. And the focus isn't going to be on that. The focus in today's episode is going to be on how, as young students, young Muslim students, studying such an intense program, being at university, how they took the initiative to get involved in different things, in different activities, in different projects, charity work, etc. How they made use of their time, how they were productive, and we'll also be discussing different tips, especially for those of you who are going to university soon or returning back to university, some tips for you all as to perhaps what you can do different as a student, and how we can bounce back from things like failure and rejection. We've got honestly, there's so much to discuss today in today's episode. It's going to be a packed show, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce my two close friends that I've known over the years. We have Dr. Naveed Khan. How are you?
Thank you so much for having us.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much for being here. And we also have Doctor in the making very soon, a few months inshallah. We have my dear brother Zakaria. Rob, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair.
Man. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. I know it's difficult to get doctors on the show, like busy people, mashallah, saving lives. But yeah, how was the experience? Let's start with that, because I like I said before we started, I have no idea, right, about this whole medical school and what happens, right? Because all I know is it's a long course, it's a good 6 years of your life that's dedicated, and the training continues after that. How's your experience been in that field?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think everyone has this perception where it's like you need to study 24/7, and I think
I have that perception.
I had the same perception when I started.
Yeah.
Well, alhamdulillah, actually, from starting, you realize that is not as intense. I think that is probably the best way to put it. Yeah.
Okay.
Effectively, in that you can find time.
Yeah.
I think that I've seen that everyone finds a use from that time they have.
Yeah.
But it is still 9 till 5. There is time outside of that.
Sure.
Where you can get up to, whether it's like Islamic society, charity activities, sports. Everyone kind of finds something to do in that time. So it isn't as intense as people imagine it to be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, obviously, it does take, like you said, a few years to get through the course.
Of course.
And there are many other courses. It's not just medicine. You've got dentistry. You've got a few PhD, masters.
Yeah,
a lot of people are getting into now, where they're having that long-term kind of carrying on to postgraduate education as well.
Okay. Naveed, would you agree with that? It's not as intense?
I think I agree, actually.
Yeah?
It's not. And I think one of the best things is that we studied in London. Both of us studied in London, went to large universities, and it meant that there was a lot going on. So even if there wasn't something at your university or within the medical school, you'd look outside of that. And I think that plays a big part to our experiences.
Yeah,
and also the fact that we knew each other, because I went to King's, he went to Queen
Yeah.
Mary Barts. And otherwise, we probably would not have met if he was in Sheffield and I was in Plymouth. It just wouldn't have happened. So it makes a big difference where you study as well.
Yeah.
And medicine itself is, I think, one aspect of the intensity means that you want to have something else. And the long term, the 5 or 6 years mean that you want to commit to something else as well, because you know that you're there for a while.
Yeah.
So you can get a lot more out of your time.
Is it difficult to get into
Yeah.
medicine in general? Yeah.
Yeah, it is difficult.
Can I put an application in? And
Yeah, you could. And
my skills are I can speak a bit of Arabic and I can host a podcast. But in general, like, is it very difficult, competitive? Because again, that's the image that I have. That's the perception I have, that really difficult to get into.
I think we'll talk more about this later on as well, but everyone on this earth has a certain skill set, don't they? And not everyone was sent to be an imam or a hafidh or a mother or a father or whatever else it is. Everyone has their own position in community and society.
Yeah.
And it just seems so that in our society, medicine has high requirements to get into it. But if everyone became a doctor, then who would do everything else? Who would be the dentist, and who would be the lawyer, and who would be the caretaker and the teacher? So it is difficult to get into, but it doesn't mean that it's any different to any other career. But we work hard, other people work hard, and it's the same thing.
Alhamdulillah. No, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And of course, it's such a it's such a noble job to have, mashallah. And it's highly looked up to, especially in our community. It's like number one on the list is like, you're going to become a doctor or you're going to become something else, right? Why do you think that is? And I might ask you a controversial question in the sense that a lot of I've met a lot of people as well that they've kind of gone into it because of that expectation from family and from parents, etc. Right? Like, oh, I want my child to become a doctor. So would you say that no, it's something that I've always wanted to do, or would you say that there is a kind of expectation there is a pressure there getting into it? What would you guys say?
I think there is that expectation, but I think the thing is, it's always a mix of reasons. The question that you're asking is actually probably the favourite question in a medicine interview.
Really?
When anyone comes in, it's why medicine?
Okay.
And honestly, probably even I can't answer it myself. You can find doctors and ask them the same question.
Yeah.
And years on, they'll be like, and it's always a mixture of reasons. You find the odd person every now and then, they have this kind of burning desire that as soon as they were a toddler, they had their first little plastic stethoscope, and then from that day, they knew they wanted to be a doctor. But most people, it's a combination of things. And from what you were saying, I think with the pressure element, if that's the sole reason, and I've seen people like at my own university, and I'm sure Naveed can relate, that there are some people who are at the university, they are intellectually kind of gifted and have the ability, and then what's pushed them is that pressure maybe from family and friends and society, and when they get to university, the course itself becomes overwhelming. We were talking about, it's not so bad, it's not so intense, but if your only motivation is outside pressure, it's you sitting that exam, and in that moment that pressure dissipates, and it's just something that you really don't want to do, and it makes it harder for you. But for myself, I think over the years, like around the A-levels time, I began like considering it. And then I actually started working in a hospital for a year in between, not actually getting rejected from medicine. And then at that point, it solidified, like, this is where I want to work and what I wanted to do. So alhamdulillah, I have that kind of reasoning for pushing towards doing medicine. What's your story?
I think to answer Shabir's question first, before I answer your questions, I think there are so many different reasons why. I think if you think about it from a Deeni perspective, they say the best knowledge after the knowledge of Deen is the knowledge of medicine, to heal people, to help people. And then even there are so many hadith on the benefits of helping others and serving others in a sense of health-wise. To save a life is like you save the best of all of mankind, and people talk about that a lot. And I think maybe culturally there is that background to it, that actually it's a really, really good thing to do in our religion. But at the same time, there's all the job security, and that probably encourages people to apply for it. But leading on from what Zakaria said, that if people enter the career for that reason, there's no way that you could stay in the career for that reason. Because even now that I'm working, I see that there's an extra level of ihsan needed to do your job well and to enjoy your job, because otherwise it just turns into a list of people that have problems and you can't be bothered and you don't want to help them. But actually, when you think about the fact that you're there to help them at their time of need, that you will make a difference. For example, I was at work yesterday and I finished everything up about an hour early, but then I thought, actually, my patients are going to be there over the weekend. They're going to have limited medical support, and it's about the fact that your deen pushes you that much bit more to go around, check on them all, see if there's anything pressing, see if they're okay for the weekend, and then you go home content and thinking that actually you tried your best, and that's you going further and actually caring about what your career is there for and what it means.
That's a really good point. So it gives a better insight into that. Where I think it's interesting is, though, like the field that I've been involved in and the field that you guys are in, though it's completely different, I feel like there's a lot of parallels and similarities in the sense that the duration, for example, that you have to study,
100%.
right? The intensity of it as well. And even things like getting pushed into it, because either if a parent's like kind of aspiration for their child is, okay, a doctor, that would be amazing, or like Hafid of the Quran or an alim, right?
100%.
And again, I've come across so many people in the field that I'm in where I could see they've been pushed into it. it's that expectation, that pressure from family, and they have to memorize the Quran. But you can see like after the result, it might be that they've achieved that, they've memorized, but then they don't have any interest in it. And again, like what Naveed, you were saying, how when they go about their job, it's different, because they're not seeing it as, oh, this is something I wanted to do and something I want to continue doing. It's more like, it's where I am now, So I think there's a lot of similarities, and we'll come back to the similarities, but let's talk about something which a lot of students, young people, and people in general have to face in life, which is rejection, right? And coming to, for example, back to the question about getting into medical school, is it easy? Both of you have had to face your fair share of rejections getting in. And I remember when Naveed, when you, mashallah, you graduated, you put up a post on Facebook, which I had a read of, and I was like amazed. I was like, wow, subhanallah. Because one thing that you highlighted was that everyone sees the success, everyone will see the end result. Oh, mashallah, this person's a doctor, this person's achieved this, but they don't know the struggles in between. So tell us a bit about your struggles. How many rejections did you face initially? Let's find out.
So, in life, or
let's start with
where do we start?
Let's start with medical school.
Categorize them. Yeah. So to get into medical school, I got 4 rejections to start off with.
4 rejections.
It was actually worse because there were 3 rejections and 1 waiting list. So the waiting list, I had to wait until results day, and I was really happy with my results. But then I just phoned them. They were like, "Oh, it's a rejection, by the way."
So this is what, like 4 different universities?
Yeah, 4 different universities.
Wow. And how did you take that initially?
I think if we go backwards, Allah made things very easy for me, different times of my life, and I think it was probably developing maybe an arrogant person, someone who was overly confident, and even when I speak to my friends, because I'm still quite close to some of my friends that I've known since I was maybe 11 years old, so who were with me through that journey, and you see that if I hadn't had those rejections, maybe I would have been a very different person today.
Okay.
So even when I was at school, I thought I was going to get into the top universities like Oxford, Cambridge, and I thought it'd be an easy path for me. So even when I applied very confidently. I didn't even look at anywhere else. I thought I'd go to 1, 2, or 3, and it's difficult at the time because I think some of the rejections came through at the same time. So I remember one day I just got 2 emails, one at 9 o'clock, one at 11 o'clock. And I was like, okay, another one. But I think at the time it really humbled me because it just showed me that I could think I was anything in the world, and the people will think you're anything in the world, but what really depends is what Allah has written for you, and you don't have control over that. And also, you might think you're as special as you are, or as clever as you are, or whatever else it is, but there's always someone better, because the reason I didn't get into it was because there was someone better than me. And it humbles you again and again. And if I didn't learn that lesson then, I probably would have struggled a lot more later on when I had to learn that lesson. And it's the same in Deen, isn't it? Because what they say is you learn one part of fiqh and you think you're the expert, but then you learn the next part and the next part and the next part, and they say it's the same thing where it just humbles you all the time. And it's amazing because, like you said, like you learned a lesson from that, and that's basically what we're supposed to do in life. When there's a difficulty or hardship, we're always supposed to look at the positive of it, because it's like the verse in the Quran where you think something is really good for you, but actually it's not. Or sometimes you think something is actually bad, but Allah knows 100%. That there's khair in it. And that's just life. Like that summarizes life for us. Whereas like things happen in life, we think, He's not listening to my prayers or something, but actually there's some good at the end of it. So okay, that's interesting. We'll come back to that. So Zach, did you have a similar, or did you slide into medical school easily?
No, so I think I can relate to a lot of what Naveed said. Actually, the first time round again, when I applied, I had 2 interviews, but then after the interviews, I got rejection. So from the 4 universities that I applied to. But I think additional to in that moment and how it kind of affects you and the character building that you undergo, I think the opportunities that opened up for me because of those rejections, I didn't even think about. And it's this kind of cliche, I guess. A lot of people say, Allah is the best of planners, and we sometimes forget or don't understand how that is, because I want to get into medicine. Surely that is the best thing for me. Like, what more can I learn from it, and so on. And actually, when I was faced with not having any kind of offers to go to university that year, it was like, what do I do? And I made the decision, actually, let me try again. I'll try again next year.
Yeah.
But then now I have a 1 year gap in between to fill. And it happened that I started working in like a hospital as like a support worker. So it's like similar to a nurse, but you haven't gone to university. You're kind of helping patients day to day. And during that year, I learned a lot more about just interacting with people and kind of caring for them in that moment without having pressure being a doctor or anything like that. And just a lot of people skills and working full time. And when I went to university and I met people who had got straight into uni, I saw, I don't know if it was like, you kind of see a naivety in people, like they've gone straight from uni. I'm like, I would have been that individual as well, not criticizing them, but as in I would have been that person. I've always done well in my exams, got straight through kind of secondary school, college, now straight into university, you know, got into medicine, and like you said, there's all these kind of things around that, like, but having that year and just seeing everyone actually, those skills that I didn't even think about, Allah, He gave me the opportunity to gain those skills without me even asking for it. And I think that really makes that real for me when, you know, when we say Allah is the best of planners. Actually, this is an example that I had no plan for this, but alhamdulillah, in the end, I actually gained from it and benefited from.
Alhamdulillah. That's amazing. It's amazing to hear that. I mean, you know, when you are, it's natural, obviously, in life, you're going to face rejections, right? A lot of people that are listening, whether it's, you know, in their careers, job-wise, or as students, right? What is the best way to bounce back from a rejection? Or is it what you guys are kind of saying is that when you are rejected, does that mean that, because, you know, there's a fine line between just kind of saying, you know what, forget it, I'm going to leave it at that, or those who are going to try again, or those who are in the middle and they're like, I'll just leave it to Allah and not do anything, you know, it's Allah's plan. So what would you say is the best kind of, you know, response when it comes to being rejected in life? It's a bit of a deep kind of question.
It's a really deep question. There isn't one straight answer for that. And I think you have to look at your personal situation. The first thing is you have to give yourself time to come to terms with it, because whether or not you think it's big or small does impact how you're going to feel about the next thing. Either your confidence will knock down, or you feel you're not good enough, or there can be so many other things associated with it. You might be relying, for example, if it's a job, you might be relying financially on getting that job, or whether it's marriage, something that people come to maybe later in life or maybe at that age as well. And it might knock them down and it might make them feel really worthless or helpless. So I think you have to give yourself time to deal with it and know how to deal with it. And I think this is something, I'm working in psychiatry at the moment, but I think it's really important that people learn to understand themselves in a safe space, whether that's with trusted friends and family members, or whether that's trained therapists, because they do amazing work. And there's no harm in reaching out, because I think what got me through those tough times was the fact that I did have a really supportive family. And they kind of pushed me back up. And I had really supportive teachers at school who kind of, I remember one teacher saying to my parents that like, he'll get into anything, like just have patience and wait. And you just need those reassuring words from people sometimes. And once you've been able to come to terms with it, I think that's when you start looking at how you can make the best out of a tough situation. Like Zakaria, he got a job, and I remember I got a job, but I also traveled a little bit and I enhanced my CV, and I also got into some stuff that probably paved the way for what I did later on at university. So like Zakaria said, I realized that it opened many more doors for me. And I only realized that looking back maybe 6 or 7 years later. But I think at the time you have to come to terms with it somehow, and you have to do things that, like self-care. It sounds as cliche as it is, but it's really, really important to kind of get that right, get your house in order, and then go out and see what else you can do.
Good tips. Zach, what would you say? Rejection.
I don't think I've got much to add. I think Naveed covered it more, but I think that to maybe even summarize his part is the balance between having the practical element as well as faith. You know, people saying, "Oh, just have faith in Allah," you know, just believe, but you need to have that practical element, and we've seen that throughout, whether it's the Sunnah or the history, wherever we see it. Even when Allah gifts something to someone, he asks for action or something
Yeah.
to be done alongside that as well. And I guess that's probably the best approach for this.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually faced a rejection like just over a year ago. So it's funny because I finished my whole alimi after like 6 years, and then again, you think, okay, yeah, I've done 6 years.
made
That's
it.
it. Like I can get into whatever now.
Yeah.
So I applied for a master's. Bearing in mind that I've never been to university, so I went from A levels
Yeah.
straight into alimi. So I've never really formally been to university, right? And I don't have a degree. So I remember I applied for an MA. And it wasn't even at a proper university. It was like more of like an institute. But they they're accredited and
Yeah.
give MAs, right? And I applied thinking, this is a stroll in the park, right? And literally, I got a rejection. And I remember that was a wake up call. I was like, why would I get rejected from here? Thinking that I've got the skills, I've got the I've got the necessary requirements to get in. And again, that feeling of it humbles you, but I would also say at the same time that if you just give up at that moment in time, then you're wasting your own time as well, because you've missed out on something. So when you're faced with a rejection in life, it's not like a bolted iron door, which means that there's no entry now. It's an obstacle which you just need to get over, and obviously there's a lesson from that. So alhamdulillah, I remember that obviously I made dua and I was like, okay, let me try it again, but not at the same place. In fact, I ended up applying for Warwick University, another MA there, which is obviously it's a renowned university, and alhamdulillah I got into that one, which is strange for me because I was like, I didn't get here, but I got into Warwick. So, but that again shows that Allah had something better in store, because you made dua and you try again. But I feel like maybe a lot of people, when it comes to rejections, it's everyone of course has different traits and personalities, right? So when you're faced with rejection, some people could take it. It could be quite heavy on them, and they might not try. But yeah, I feel like these stories should, inspire people who are listening and watching, to definitely try again if they are faced with rejections, because that is the nature of life. You're gonna have to overcome that, So, go on.
And I think with my Facebook post, it's one of the things about social media, isn't it? That
That's it.
I use social media quite a lot. I do enjoy it. But I think one of the things I hate about it is it skews your mental perception of what people are up to in life. And you just think that because people are posting about their weddings and jobs and eating out all the time, that everyone has a perfect life. But obviously, there are other aspects to it. Like maybe some people are posting because they're showing off. Maybe some people are posting because they don't want to complain. And maybe other people are posting to spread positivity. So you don't know what people's intentions are, but it kind of gives you that positive image. And I think when I was going through difficult times, you realize that you feel like you're alone sometimes, or you feel like you're the only one struggling. But alhamdulillah, I had a good support network around me. But I think that's when I shared my graduation post, I just wanted to be real about it at the same time. And it's not to say I would have been false if I didn't share all of that information, but I thought that actually, if it helps someone in their difficult time, pushes them and motivates them to see that actually everyone goes through this and it's part and parcel of life, which I guess once upon a time you would have known because you had a better community and it wasn't just what you saw of someone on social media. But it makes a difference, doesn't it, when you go through that time by yourself?
Definitely. It makes a huge difference. Let's move on to maybe something a bit more positive, because we have to of course talk about the struggles, and it doesn't end there. Of course, there were many struggles that both faced during your study. It wasn't the case that you got in and that was it, everything was just smooth after that. There's a lot of struggles along the way, but one thing I really wanted to discuss was how now you're studying, and you're away from family, and you're busy with your studies now, and again it's quite intense, but coming back to the question that was at the beginning, that do you have time to do other things? Now the question would be, what other things did you both get involved in during your studies, and where did that did you feel like what you did on the side also shaped you to help you become who you are today over the years? let's talk about it, because there's so many different
Yeah.
aspects of it, right? So I guess one thing that both of you have in common is getting involved in Charity Week, right? Which is not too far away now,
No,
right? Not too long
weeks.
away, inshallah. But
The
yeah.
trailer was released yesterday.
Yeah. Trailer was released, right? So let's talk about Charity Week, and what was the beginnings in Charity Week. Or you can even begin actually even with eye socks.
Yeah.
We
I
can
think
talk about eye
because
socks as well.
before the Charity Week journey, I don't know about you, but I first heard about
Yeah.
Charity Week obviously in the Islamic Society from the ISOC.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where it started for me in university.
Okay.
And before university, I guess I didn't really know much about ISOCs. Like, there's a society where the Muslims come together. Okay,
Yeah.
probably something interesting to
Yeah.
get involved with, or like kind of see, go along to. So then when I first started, there's like a fair usually with the stalls and stuff like that of the different societies, and that's the point that I found. Okay, this is where the ISOC is, and you sign up and kind of come along to the events. I guess that was just like for me the awareness side, but in terms of the involvement, started really around when they started doing events more so like Charity Week, where you could actually go along and volunteer, not just kind of go see, eat food and then go home again.
Yeah.
And one thing I guess that I think I did, and then I would advise other people to do if they're interested in actually actively getting involved in things, is the fact that when you go to events, and you've probably had it, when you have an event and you bring guests in, you want them to have the best experience. So you want them to do nothing, right? You want them to come in, sit down, I'll get you whatever you want, and then you just talk and chat amongst yourselves. But I find that really boring. I don't know. For me, what I enjoy getting involved in doing something.
Yeah.
And
So they have a nickname for Zakaria for this. This is the reason they have a nickname for him. And is when I first met Zakaria, they said, "Oh, this is Zach, no chill Rob." So it probably makes sense to why they called him No Chill Rob, because this is the type of person he is.
Mashallah.
but I think why I want to mention it is actually, so there was bucket collection. So you go out, they give you a bucket. I think it was the tube stations or something, and the extent of that is the people organizing it. They'll give you everything you need, and they'll give you a spot to go to, and you raise what you can. And then obviously at the end of that, it usually ties up. You give the bucket back to the individual, and then that's it, I'm going home. But then I was like, where are you going now? And I thought I'll follow him along. And obviously he went to going back to the student union, and they have to count all the money that everyone's raised and then fill in checks and all of that business. So I kind of followed him along, and after that point, then I realized actually the following day he started messaging me, "Oh, do you want to come help out at," rather than, "Oh, you coming to the event, can you come help out at this or whatever." And that was really where the journey of not just attending the events, but actually getting involved and becoming someone who can do a little bit more. And I guess if you think about it, you can gain more ajr, you can gain more reward from merely not just attending the event, but you're helping set it up and providing for the experience for those individuals.
Interesting. So how many years have you been involved now in
It's been about 5 years, I think. Yeah, just over
5
5
years?
years. So I'm in my 6th year at university. So just,
Okay.
I'd
So
say
about
just
5
over
years.
5 years, yeah.
So how does it work? So when you started, you were just like a volunteer?
Yeah, so in terms of, like I said, in that first year, you can usually just attend events.
Yeah.
But you can also get involved a little bit more. And then from the following years, and Naveed probably say the same, as in the following, once you've got an understanding of the society and what's going on, then there's like a AGM, there's roles open for people to go to, and you can kind of apply. And then that's where I started with the Charity role, kind of, okay, I'll organize the events for Charity on my campus the following year. So they call it like the Charity rep role. Yeah.
Interesting. And now, what would you class? What team are you part of now?
So now, alhamdulillah, for the Charity organization, I'm part of the international team as well. I feel like maybe we need to explain what Charity is.
I feel like that as well.
Naveed,
All
Naveed
three of
can
us, we kind of know. But yeah, let's come to Naveed then. Maybe you can go into more detail on Charity Week.
Yeah, so Charity Weeks was founded by another doctor, actually, about 17, 18 years ago.
We're getting him on, by the way.
Oh,
he's coming on very soon,
mashallah.
inshallah.
So it was founded by him. Sorry, I'm getting old. I think it's 15 years ago.
Yeah.
15 years ago. So the aim of it was that, alhamdulillah, we've touched on this a little bit already, that we have so many Muslims in the UK, alhamdulillah, now, but also around the world in different communities. but the community structure is breaking down. What we have now is we have isolated fragments, units of people, and when you're going through a tough time, it can be really bad because people are alone. But not even that, it's the fact that there's no voice, there's no identity. People go through struggles in the deen and there's no support system for them. And one of the reasons that we have that is because there's a growing lack of unity, where before the Ummah would come together, there'd be a community system, there'd be that support network. It was slowly falling apart. And you have amazing work being done in Islamic societies. But one of the amazing things that you do see is you see more unity than you would probably see in your local masjid, in your youth group, or in your local community where there might be many more Muslims, but you see them much less. There's less interaction. So that's where Charity Week was founded. It was kind of to increase the sense of unity at university within the ISOCs. And that meant making ISOCs more inclusive, bringing all of the Muslims together under one banner, just because we believe in La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and it's just the core principles of Islam. But it's not just about universities, because the impact of Charity Week, it aims to unite people from the grassroots level, and the aim is to reach everyone, every single person around the world, and all on the same cause. So that's the aim of Charity Week, to unite people, and the way we unite people is through a week of charity. It's a Charity Week, and through that week of fundraising, it happens all around the world in 1 week at one time, where people are wearing the same t-shirts with the same videos, same banners, and bucket collections and cake sales might begin in California, and they go on all day long, because as the time zones switch, it spreads across the 6 countries, and it's just beautiful to see, mashallah. And it's growing. So
that's the thing, because obviously, alhamdulillah, like I've always been a keen supporter of Charity Week and tried to get involved however I can, and it's just been amazing to see. I think the biggest achievement is what you've just mentioned, the unity. But on top of that, obviously, you have the amount that is raised, the collective amount. I think that's beautiful to see, like at the when it's announced of the totals, like all these different countries, which is made up of smaller institutions coming together, and over the years, mashallah, it's surpassed the £1 million mark in a week, like to raise £1 million. And these are like, and this is the thing, this was interesting, is that it's not really so much the students themselves that have donated, because students, you know what it's like to be a student, right? You don't have much in your pocket, but it's the fact that they've put in their collective time and efforts, and then gone out and reached out to a wider kind of audience to get that money in, and then like over £1 million in 1 week. It's amazing to see. So of course, Naveed, you've also been involved in Charity Week now. How many years?
6 years, I think.
6 years.
Yeah, I joined the team in 2014, so it's my 6th year.
Okay, awesome. And are you also? You must be part of. What's your role now?
I'm the Vice International Director.
Vice International.
One of them.
Okay,
because there are 2 of us, so alhamdulillah.
Okay, and what does that even involve? Like, you're saying international team, so what would that involve? Is it a lot of meetings? A lot of, what would you say? Planning, strategy?
Yeah. So you probably hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
In terms
Really?
of strategy, whereby
So
it's institutions do the actual groundwork, so they're the ones organizing the events, fundraising, and getting volunteers on the ground involved. But who provides the institution the direction of what week is it going to be in, what do you do with the money once you've raised it, where's the t-shirts coming from? So then there'll be a team locally within that region that provide that advice to them. And then it's like, how do all of the teams in different regions know what they're doing? So there's a national team, and then eventually you get it to an international team who coordinate between the countries in terms of, they know what's going on. So that's really it. So I think it changes from fundraising, when you're on the ground fundraising, to more strategy, to then people management and ensuring everyone's trained with the right skills to do that.
Okay. I wanted to ask a quick question, like, just maybe even even away from Charity Week, obviously the Charity Week, you're involved in an international team now, right? And whatever it is, whether it's you're involved in Islamic societies or other small charity initiatives, right? Like, how much of your time did that take up? Because again, it's not just medicine, because obviously students studying even anything else, right? Law or whatever else it might be. Obviously, everyone's busy. Everyone needs to study. They need to dedicate a good amount of time to their studies. How much time would something like that take up? And, did you find time? How was that whole thing?
I think you'll always find time for something if
Yeah.
it's important enough to you. And it's the same thing if you ask someone, oh, did you watch that new series on Netflix? And they'll say, oh, it was so good, I watched it all night long. And I finished it by the time the morning came. And if you talk to people have watched Friends. It's a series with, I don't know how many seasons, like 13 seasons and 20 episodes in each one. And they've watched it numerous times over and over again. And that's days and days of full on-the-go streaming. So I think that sort of question is a fair question to ask, but I think it shouldn't matter. And if you care enough about something, you'll always make time for it. But I think it's hard to approach that when you don't care about it. And maybe when you're starting off with different activities, you are worried about how much time you'll have for your studies and your family and your friends. And I think that's where, when you start looking into it, you have half an hour here, half an hour there, 20-minute pocket here, 20-minute pocket there. And I think one of your previous guests, Salah, Salah talked really, really eloquently about how to manage your time. And I think when you start looking at how you manage your time, and there's someone called Productive Muslim, he's written an amazing book, and he delivers a course on this as well. And when you start looking at things like that, you realize that actually there's lots and lots of time in your day. But a couple of hours a week can probably get you very, very far and help you do a lot.
I would also add, like, in terms of on the flip side, not just the time that it takes, but by becoming involved in something like Islamic society or charity or something, what's the effect that it has on your studying time? In terms of, I've seen people like, if you don't have anything outside, then you're in university or wherever you are, college, during the day, and then you go home, and the only thing on your mind is obviously doing more work and revision and stress and so on. And that can only go on for so long until you effectively be burnt out from that. But if you have something else to do, then actually you can become more efficient in your revision. Do you know what I mean? I think for myself even, I wouldn't say I'm the best student by any means, but I find that I can cover some content in a smaller amount of time, not because I want to, but because I'm limited in time, because I know, oh, I need to catch up on a meeting, or I need to do this. So then I've got X amount of time left for my studies. But alhamdulillah, there's some barakah in there that just allows me to cover it. So I think what Naveed's saying, obviously the time itself is flexible and you'll want to do it. But then by putting in your time into worthwhile activities, it has an effect on your studying time where it makes that more efficient, I think, and puts some goodness in that as well.
Like, wouldn't you say, like, obviously it all sounds a bit crazy. Some people listening might be like, oh my God, like, studying medicine and then doing all this stuff on the side, you barely get any time to yourself. But wouldn't you say that during those years of being a student or at university, that is the best time to do all of that? Because once you've graduated, once you've got a job, and once you're married, obviously things change, and you have to give, you're more limited in time. Not to say again that you don't have the time, right? Because it just comes back to the same thing we're speaking about. But wouldn't you say those student years are those years where you should just go all out? What do you think?
100%. It's the best time of your life, and the reason it's probably the best time of my life is because I got involved in so many different things. I met so many different people. I never would have met Zakaria otherwise. Met him, and
I wouldn't have met you too.
I wouldn't have met you either. We met through the same networks, and it's why would you deny yourself that opportunity? And if nothing else, you start things. It's not as if Zakaria and I went to university or even before university and we just jumped into something really big that required a large commitment. You kind of ease yourself in and you know where your own boundaries are. And it's even like me, I started work and I've taken a little step back to help myself adjust. And you build relationships where you have that flexibility where when you need to step back, you step back. And when you have a bit more time, you give more time. But I think it's really important that you commit at least a small amount of your time, and it's a commitment that you don't let go of, because once you do let go, you're losing that opportunity for sadaqah jariyah, for khair, and it's difficult to pull them back into your life later on.
Even for me, I feel like personally that, I always say that during those student years, you need to get involved in something that will help you. It will build something, whether it's people skills that we've spoken about, whether it's, just in general, getting to know people, networking, because it always will help you afterwards. There's always something, obviously you don't go into something like charity expecting, a great return, right? But just knowing that getting involved in something, in your own spare time, it will
100%.
always help you later. So if anything, like most of the stuff that I'm involved in now, post studies, it's only because I was involved in it prior. Like even this Ilm Feed podcast, for example, like how am I presenting something? It's only because during my studies, I just took a leap of faith, and I was like, I like presenting. So I just went on TV, and I started, literally, that's how I started. I'm presenting on
onto a TV set.
Yeah, literally, like, yeah, give me a show to present, right? No, but obviously it's to do with a network as well. You know someone, you express your interest.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to this, this fear of rejection or failure. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's going to turn around and say no. And then just carry on. Like, what was the worst that happened? You didn't lose out on money, you didn't lose out on anything. It's just a no. You just have to be like brave enough. So for me, it was like, let me try it out. And that was during my studies. I remember it was really early on. I'll tell you the story, right? And the TV show channel was new at the time.
Okay.
So it's not like a well-known TV channel. So I remember sitting there, and I literally got there. It was like a late night one. It was a Q&A program with Sheikh Shams al-Duha, right?
Oh, I think I remember this.
Yeah. So and so I remember, just bearing in mind, I've never presented on TV before.
Yeah.
And I got there. I remember the show was supposed to start at 10 p.m. I got there like an hour early, thinking that I'm going to be trained, thinking that I'm going to get there and the producers are going to tell me what to do and everyone's going to like guide me step by step. Waiting. It's like 9:45, 9:50, 9:55, and I'm sitting there, and the cameras are all on, the lights are all on me, yeah. And then the sheikh walks in, and then all that happened, I kid you not, is that the main guy, he walked in through the door, and he was like, "Shabbir, are you alright, yeah?" And I was like, "Yeah, alhamdulillah." He's like, "You got this," and he walked out. I didn't even know how to introduce the show. I don't know what to say. It was just, and all I can hear in my ear is, right, 1 minute left, 3, 2, 1. If I could have just froze at that moment and be like, I don't know what to say. I was just like, "Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh," and I introduced the show, and it was because of that alhamdulillah now, like I'm presenting on other TV channels and this podcast, etc. But I've had to build that skill. So that's just like a basic example. So coming back to what we're saying is that it's those student years.
Yeah.
So student years is what you do. It will definitely shape you as to who you are.
I think one thing I want to add as well is in terms of there's an impact during those years, and you're saying actually there's opportunities that come from it. From an Islamic perspective, one of the things is depending on what career you're going into, if it is just generally, in the business sector, public sector, wherever it is, not an Islamic organization. So finishing university, you're going to start working there. There may not be a lot of Muslims working with you, and you may not have that environment where in university, after lectures, someone's like, "Oh, I'm going to pray the Dhuhr now. Are you coming along?" And then you go along to them, with them. When you're at work, you may not have that individual. There may be even Muslims around you, but they won't be the ones pulling you towards Salah. And if you are able to establish something during university where you're involved in a project that can go beyond university, then that might be the thing that pulls you back. I think I've spoken to a lot of doctors, of the ones that I've graduated on, and they say they miss that community feel in when they're in hospital. It's so busy as well. No one's there to remind you about Salah, or even just going over Quran, whatever it may be. But because they're involved in some organization maybe, or somewhere where there's even a reminder shared for 5 minutes, that's their nugget of like Islam or like tarbiyah, something coming back to them. And if you can get that in university, you're not only are you preparing for your career, you're saying actually, inshallah, there's something as well, kind of maintaining that dini element. But one thing I want to add with that is, you may be like, okay, fine, I get that, I understand that. And I was involved with a few different things, so like obviously ISOC charity and a few other kind of things. It was like, okay, if I kind of try to keep up all of them, then hopefully something will obviously come through surely when I start working. But I spoke to a brother and he gave a really good piece of advice, that he said, if you're involved with say 5, 6 things, whatever it is, and then the time struggles, family, all of this comes after you've graduated, all of those little ones, you're not invested in any 100%. So then what you'll see is you'll drop all of them. Whereas if you inclined to one and you build into one organization or something, then actually, because that means something for you, you're invested in it, then when those struggles come, you may kind of lighten the load, but hopefully, or inshallah, there'll be a higher chance that you maintain the relationship with that one organization or that one project that can keep up the reminders and tarbiyah for you. So actually, in this sense, one thing is not kind of having, trying to loads of things. Try it early on in university, but then as you get on through the years, try to hone down on one thing you think that's really important to you and that you can give your skill set and gain the most from as well. And keep that up, inshallah.
It's funny because it's all this is all so familiar. Even with me, like my teachers gave me the same advice. I was trying to get involved in too many things. You get overly excited and zealous, like no, and it's with a good intention. A lot of the times, like no, I want to help out as much as I can. I want to do this. I want to go to this event. I want to volunteer here. But my teachers are like, listen, you're gonna completely burn yourself out. And the same thing, they were like, you're never actually gonna do it justice and do ihsan to it.
Exactly.
It's just going to be a half-hearted job at the end of the day. So you feel impressed by the end of it. Oh yeah, I managed to do. So it comes back to similar discussions we've had in the past about being busy and then being productive. There's always that thing, right, where it feels good being busy. Like every I've got stuff to do, right? But half of that stuff is not even important, or it's not benefiting anyone. There's nothing that comes to fruition at the end of it. But all of this stuff is really important, what we're discussing. Why? Because I tell you that you probably know that a lot of students, when they apply to uni, there's this like romanticized idea, I'm going to be independent now, and I'm going to go to uni, and I'm just going to chill and go out and stuff like that. But the reason why all this is important is because to show you that long term, getting involved in something, whether it's with charity or ISOC, etc., it's going to have a long term kind of like impact and benefit. So all of this stuff is really, really good. On that note, because there's a lot of students going to university, and you guys, mashallah, have been there not just for 2-3 years, but 5-6 years.
Too many years.
Yeah, too many years. Did you by the way spend more than that? Like, did you have to like retake along the way?
Yeah, I retook a year, so it was
really.
I did a master's in 1 year, so it was 5, 6, 7 years.
7 years. Wow.
Alhamdulillah.
Wow. Okay. So on that, with that being said, what would your advice be to, let's say someone who's ready to go to university, has just been accepted now, Freshers Week and all of that? What kind of tips or piece of advice would you give?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my gap year.
Yeah.
And in my gap year, I told you I had a job, and I had a job at this really big pharmaceutical company. But my manager's manager was a Muslim.
Okay.
Brother, he had a beard. He would go to pray, like all of his salahs in the prayer room on time. And we've developed a really good relationship. And I remember the day I was leaving, we had a meeting. He called me into his office, and he said to me, Naveed, make sure that your prayer mat is not just a piece of decoration on the wall. Yeah, he said, make sure your prayer mat is not just a piece of decoration on the wall. And that piece of advice stuck with me because it was telling me to maintain salah. And while I was working there, actually, that was the time in my life where I said to myself, I need to get serious now. Yeah. And he was an excellent role model for me in that sense. And when I came to university, I did follow that rule. And I thought to myself, okay, whatever happens, I'm not going to let go of my salah because it defines me as a Muslim.
Yeah.
And that was what led me to messaging on Facebook, where's the prayer room? I need to go to the prayer room. And I went to the prayer room, and of course, you have expectations, and your expectations aren't always met, and you think that it's going to be something, but it's not always the same thing. But the fact that I followed that one rule really helped me gravitate towards khair, and I think that's what Zakaria was recommending earlier. So you need to set yourself rules and boundaries, and whether that's saying, I'm never going to do ABC, or whether that's saying, I'm always going to do X, Y, Z, you need to set those rules and boundaries for yourself, because when you go to university or when you start living independently, you do get pulled in all sorts of directions. And it's difficult to know what's right and what's wrong and what's okay to try and what isn't okay to try. And the scary thing is that you don't know how long something's going to last. Someone might say that they'll do something that might not be acceptable or might be wrong once, but they don't know if that might lead to a second time and third time. Whereas we know that the shaitan, that's how he draws people in. And at the same time, that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws you closer to him. One step towards khair means that you'll be taking 10 steps forward. So if you can have as many attachments to khair as possible and still explore and expand your horizons and really cross the limits within Islam, then you'll really see and do some amazing things.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent piece of advice, and I think because like we said that obviously these years are the best years of your life, but at the same time they could also be detrimental.
They can be the worst years of your life.
They could be the worst.
Yeah,
and I've heard both sides of the spectrum. Like people are like just haven't enjoyed it, or it's gone completely wrong for them, and then they've had to kind of fix themselves up at a later point in life because those years went wrong. And I think it is that element of having that independence and thinking that I might as well enjoy it now.
Yeah.
Because later I'm going to be.
No one's watching.
Yeah, exactly, isn't it? Yeah.
This is a common feeling, I guess. We see it in our masjids, right? We see the elders are the ones that are the most regular in prayer, and we're like, okay, I don't know where the kind of mindset originates from, really, but it's something that people see. Yeah. Oh, I'll do what I like now, and then eventually, I'll fix up. But then, as Naveed
make up
said,
for it when I get old.
Yeah, but there's no guarantee of how long it is, and I think actually that one thing I noticed as well is whenever you start, say, a new organization, like even working in a new place, things like salah, having to ask for a break to go pray, things like that, become more difficult the longer you leave it.
Yeah.
Right? And just from, not even from an Islamic perspective, just from a kind of social perspective, you come along, you stay with your friendship group, you go for lunch or whatever. Maybe there's non-Muslims. A lot of us may have gone to like Islamic school or a community where there's a lot of Muslims, and then when we go to university, there's a lot of non-Muslims that don't even know about Islam or praying, that you're expected to pray and so on. And you go along for lunch, and then you go back to lectures and so on. And then say a few weeks later, you're like, okay, it's time to pray now. I guarantee you it will be more difficult for you to approach the subject or go away to pray at that point, because they'll question you. You're like, oh, I need to go pray because it's something in my religion. They will ask you like, oh, what about last week? Like, did you go to pray then, right? Whereas from day one, if you're like, I need to go to pray, it removes any. There might be some awkwardness that you feel in that moment, but then after that, there's an expectation. Oh, you're going to go to pray after we've eaten lunch. It's something that you do. We understand that.
Yeah.
And it makes things so 100%. Much easier for you. And I found it, especially at work, when you're working, you're at shift, you have to ask, maybe you're paired up with someone that you're working with. You have to obviously go to pray. And maybe you feel awkward, but if you can overcome that step and implement your principles where your boundaries lie and things like that at the earliest moment, then actually it'll make it easier for you in the long run as well.
I think that's one of a challenge for young Muslims, even today especially, as university students, is, that carrying that Muslim identity is quite difficult, isn't it? But you'll find that actually if you take the steps and you're kind of proud of it and you embrace that and you have faith in Allah, then actually you'll even find like non-Muslims are so accommodating.
Yes.
You might expect, subhanAllah, like no, they're gonna think something of me, but like in the workspace, like if you ask from the beginning, like Zakaria was saying, that they'll actually be like, yeah, you know what, take an extra 10 minutes for your Friday prayers, go along. But automatically I've met so many people, they're like, no, I've just joined, I can't ask now because it's asking for too much. And then actually when they ask, they're like, yeah, there's no problem with that. So
and if anything, they respect you more because they think that this person has principles and they stand by it.
Exactly.
Sometimes people even say to me, pray for me as well, please. And I do.
Mashallah. Yeah, so I think identity is key. But, on the other side of it, some could argue, like people listening, they're like, oh, but you guys are lucky because you went to London, you were in London, and in London there's a large concentration of Muslims. What if I'm in a university where there's barely any Muslims around, there's not much going on? What advice would you give to those people? Because it's going to be more difficult for them, isn't it? So what would you say? I mean, I was born in Exeter, right? So I know, like it's completely different.
I'm interested to see what Naveed says.
So I think before I answer that, I also wanted to add that when you're at university as well, you want to get involved with khair. So we've talked about the aspects of building your Jannah, you're talking about the afterlife that you're building by doing all of these activities, and you want that tug. But there's also the dunya aspect, that you are developing so many skills that you will not even realize, because by getting involved with this society or that society, planning this event, or even just interacting with people, your communication skills, your critical thinking skills, your aspect and acceptance of diversity goes up in a way that does not go in other places. For example, at my Youth Students Union, it seems that the Islamic society is achieving a lot more than so many other societies.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that they're doing the most work or the hardest work, but it's to say that it's the level of Islam that when people do the work, they put into it. And so from that aspect, that if you get involved with other societies, you're going to build your CV in a way that no one else has done before.
Yeah.
And I've written so many references for people. And when I write these references and people say thank you to me afterwards, and they got this job and that job, and it's only because they had so much to give and they learnt all of that while they were at university rather than waiting till after they finished. And that goes on to answering a question about what do you do when you're alone. You think about the aspect of Jannah again. You're going to build something from scratch, and there's even more reward for that, because 100%. If you stand up as a first Muslim, then the second one will come through and the third one will come through. And if you're the first person with a beard in that environment, then maybe someone else will want to keep one as well. I remember I went to a school with not many Muslims, and I remember the first girl in my school to come and wear hijab. It was a few years in, and I was speaking to her brother recently. So I randomly met this brother, and he said, oh, my sister went to the same school, and he started telling me how difficult it was for her to wear hijab. And then I told him, I said, but does she know that so many girls in that school started wearing hijab after that? Like so many other Muslim girls who maybe they wanted to before, but they felt more encouraged to because they saw another sister. And it's the same when I went to that school. No one had a beard, and my beard didn't grow till after school anyway. But I remember speaking to another brother, and he was the first one to keep a beard, and he had real issues at school because it maybe wasn't tidy enough or neat enough, but he's opened the door for so many other people, and that's what you have the pleasure and the honor of doing, that Allah has chosen you to build this community and build the foundations.
You're the pioneer, basically.
And everything to come will be in your books as well, inshallah. So take courage.
That's a very good point. First one. There's more reward, of course. Like the Prophet said, that you're directing others to do good. You're going to get the reward for everyone else, and I think that's a great motivation to have going forward. Zakaria, you want to add anything to that?
I think it's the main thing is flipping the mentality, like you said, see it as an opportunity as opposed to a hindrance, and if you can do that, I think you unlock the kind of solution to it.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. So we have, subhanAllah, because obviously our Feed family is all over the world, not just in the UK. Alhamdulillah. So I think that, for those who have, alhamdulillah, listened and tuned in to this episode, I think there's great tips and piece of advice for students, and not just for students, but I think in general, people who have faced rejections or have faced difficulties. I think it's kind of flipping it, like we said, having the right mindset. As Muslims, we're always taught not to lose hope, and to have like more of a positive mindset, to have a positive outlook in life. So alhamdulillah, I think we've covered a lot, and to be honest, we could speak about so much more, but time does not permit. But I just want to thank you both, Jazakumullah khairan, to Naveed and Zakaria, for joining us. Thank you. And I've definitely learned a lot from you both, and I wish you all the best. And obviously we have Charity Week coming up. You guys are going to be busy, or you're already busy. You've already been busy, mashallah, planning and everything.
Zakaria's doing all the hard work. So. Hashtag CW 2019. You know where to find it.
Mashallah. May Allah bless you both, and all the best, inshallah. And Zakaria, we'll be calling you doctor soon as well, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in once again. I hope you enjoyed, hope you benefited from today's episode. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and find us on iTunes. Spread the word, inshallah. Spread the khair, and we'll be back with you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.